Hey guys, Veronica here. I'm back in the forest today and I am super excited because I finally have a good problem to share with you guys. So a couple of weeks ago I planted potatoes in this area and it was just before the canopy had really started to fill in, but I looked up and I saw a decent sized hole in the canopy and I was watching the light for a few days before I set this up and said, okay, that looks like it might get full sun even once there are leaves. Now, I knew I could be wrong with those calculations because I hadn't spent much time in this forest area. And so one of the things that I did to prepare for this being a mistake was I planted all of my seed potatoes on one side of the bed and basically nothing but a couple of herbs here and there on the other side of the bed, just in case this happened. And guess what? Clearly it happened. So I walked out earlier this week and we've been getting a fair amount of rain in the last few weeks. And I noticed that these guys are looking really tall and leggy. Now, since I grew potatoes last year, I know what potatoes are supposed to look like as they grow, and they tend to be a little stockier and bushy, and you hill up the soil around them. I was doing it in bags, and so I'd hill up the soil around them, and then they'd get stocky and bushy again, and you continue doing that until the bag was full. Now, these guys are definitely a lot leggier than the ones I grew last year. So there's two things that need to happen here. One, we have to get them back on track to be a little bit stockier and bushier of a plant. But also, I'm going to have to open up the canopy just a little bit so that we can get more sunlight in here. Now, I'm not opening the canopy on camera today because I'd like to track it for at least another week or two and just decide exactly what branches I need to take out so that we're not creating more problems than we're solving. It currently gets almost full sun between the hours of 1 and 4. So it's really only a few of the morning hour branches and a few of the evening hour branches that I need to worry about in this space. Now, I chose the forest to test these potatoes in because one of the things I've learned with potatoes so far is they really don't like to be in warm soil. So once your soil temperature is over like 80-85 degrees, they kind of stop producing. But they also need a lot of light because these compound leaves that potatoes have, they basically are what creates the starch that forms the potatoes underground on the underground stems that are also known as stolons. And without having a fair amount of foliage on your plant, because they're not getting a lot of light, you're going to get this reaching and you're also not going to get a lot of potatoes. So again, creating more problems than we're solving. But we're going to solve them both today. And I wanted to go over a method that I saw after doing a little bit of digging, and it's something that I had wanted to try but never had a good excuse to until now. And it's basically, rather than hilling up the soil as they grow, we're going to lean them forward into the soil and bury them beneath just like a little trench of soil. And I'm going to show you because it's easier than explaining. So what I'm going to do here is move aside this mulch to get to the compost underneath. Now, I added compost to this area because potatoes are a tuber, and that means that you need to dig them at the end of the season in order to harvest them. And I didn't want to be digging up all of the forest floor in order to make that happen because there are a lot of trees here and there's lots of roots and there's lots of things that could go wrong. So I decided, rather than letting them burrow into the forest floor, that I just give them some really nice fluffy compost that's a mix of a couple of composts that I found. And see if they wouldn't grow happily in there. Now, the forest floor soil is kind of a sandy, silty loam, so if they get into it, it's not a huge stressor on them because they like that kind of soil, but I don't expect them to really like burrow down deep into it. I mean, we'll see, right? But all I'm going to do is dig a trench in front of the leggy potato in question. I'll do this guy for demo, and then I'm going to gently, you can see he has little roots already coming out forming potatoes. So exciting! I'll gently lay the stem over and then I'm going to bury it up to these top leaves. Now, this is not going to buy me a lot of space if they decide to get leggy again, but it might actually give me a shot at some potatoes for harvest because all of the stem that gets buried is then potentially going to produce potatoes. So at least it's on the right track. Now, potatoes really like to be mulched. So, I mean, we're talking about summer vegetables in general like to be mulched, maybe like 2 inches or so. Potatoes need at least a good 4 inches of mulch. That will help keep their soil cool. It'll also help prevent light from reaching the tubers so that they don't turn green and are just like bitter and awful. So we want to avoid that. This variety of potatoes is one that I grew last year that I loved and I had to grow again. They're called the Upstate Abundance from Row 7, which is a fairly new seed company. But I really like them a lot because they're very small. So they're like a new potato. Even when they're fully ready, they're still like a new potato. And the flavor is just like off the charts buttery without anything, you know, just boiling them, but like without any butter or oil, even just a little bit of salt. Like, they're just awesome. I mean, they're great with butter and olive oil too, but definitely as is, just cooked, are awesome. So I had to grow them again. I got decent production from them last year out of bags. I'm hoping for even better in this space now that I'm working with soil that's not as compacted as the compost I was using last year. And I don't expect the roots to get as hot, so maybe we'll actually get a better harvest. But we'll see. I also have potatoes out in a tower in full sun. The base of it's a little buried in compost, and we may cover that at some point in the near future. But right now, these guys are the ones that I am focused on, even though they're planted just a little bit too close together. We'll see if we can't get some production in this space. So I don't really bother with the larger potatoes. Like the larger ones, your baking potatoes, like your russets and Idahos and stuff, they just need such a long, cool season to really produce that I think unless you live in a place that has that, like you may end up a little bit disappointed. So I may come in here as well and move the mulch back and add a little more compost as they grow and just kind of like weave them back and forth until the end of the season when the greens start dying back. But it's kind of a play it by ear situation. So I'm going to be trimming up the canopy a little. We're going to be burying all of these stems, and then we're going to see what happens next, because that's like 90% of the fun of gardening for me, is trying to figure out what problems I'm going to encounter and plan for those. So we've got one down. I'm sure we have more to go. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them, especially if you've done this before. Like, please leave me a comment in the comments below. I couldn't find anything that was like, nah, don't do that, it's a terrible idea. There was somebody who had heard of another farmer who had done this and said they had the best harvest they ever had, and it's a friend of a friend of a friend sort of story. So I don't know, there were no pictures, but if you've done it and you loved it or you hated it, I want to know. So leave me a comment in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see how I manage these sorts of problems and more throughout the garden all year long. And follow me on Instagram at FlavorKit, because there's always little problems that I'm not able to cover in videos because they're just, you know, just little things here and there that pop up as I'm working. But maybe it's stuff that you run into as well, and I'd hate for you to miss out on that. So until next time, happy gardening.